I'm going to animate a character and we're going to do an action sequence. Michelle Yeoh is pretty popular right now after the Oscars, and I feel like this is an appropriate time to kind of use this fight sequence as a reference. So this is the sequence that I basically grabbed and I'm using as my reference point. And what I'm looking for are the main action poses that the characters have. So in the starting pose, I can see that it's very stoic. She has like a very strong kind of stance, and then it counters with her hand, and then the sword kind of comes out. What I'm doing is I'm looking at this Michelle Yeoh and I'm looking for the kind of line of action for in each of these references. So as she takes a step forward, all her weight is in the front, but then she is kind of leaning forward a little bit with her foot trailing back. And then the next step, she is launching forward more, kind of thing. So I'm looking at the line of action and I'll notice that there's a lot of these dynamic curves that she's making. So I'm looking at her line of action, but I'm also looking at her sense of weight. So this is why, you know, like we recommend doing life drawing, and we recommend doing like really quick gesture work, because it allows you to really quickly analyze a sense of weight and balance in your characters. So when I was studying this, I was essentially just looking for the line of action and the main sense of weight in this pose. If you look at her sequence, she's essentially walking. This is the contact pose. So we got a contact pose. And then this is the up pose, where now her leg has moved to the back and it's pushing upwards. And then now it's back to a down or contact pose kind of thing. So she's constantly taking these steps, and I was keeping an eye on this, and I was like, okay. So it's essentially a walk pose. So two things that I had to keep an eye on, which is line of action, and then two, placement of the feet. We'll just call it that. And the placement of feet is really important because it makes your character, especially if they're taking a step forward and if they're walking, it makes it look like their character's actually moving forward. And it'll also make it look like your character's not sliding. Footwork is kind of important. It can make your fights and movements feel really dynamic. So these were the two things that I was like really keeping an eye on. And the next thing after that is I then put the reference images, like those screenshots, on my second monitor, and I essentially did a rough blocking of the sequence. I'll flip through them first, and then afterwards I'll play it. So I'm going to show you my rough block, and you can kind of see what it kind of turned out looking like. Now this is a rough block, meaning that it's not meant to look really refined or anything, but just a way for me to see whether the action and the motion is flowing properly and get a good sense of consistency. So this is her initial step, and you can tell that like this is based off of that original pose. So it's based off of this one where she's just holding her sword, but because I changed up the angles a little bit and basically the camera position's different, I can't exactly follow this completely. So I took the idea of this pose and then I made it my own. So I wanted, because in the second pose, right after I move the image, I bring it back. So you can see in the next pose that I've screenshotted, she has her left foot is in the front. What I noticed is that her left foot is in front. So because in this first image, I can't see where her leg is, but I love this pose. I'm like, okay, in order for her leg to be like this, her left foot probably has to be in front. So that's what I did, is I just had the exact same pose where she's holding the sword out and she has her left foot in front. And then the next pose is that initiating pose, right? Where she's taking a step forward, she's starting to move down. And so you can look at the trail and you can see that it's kind of moving down and her body is shifting down. So there's now this kind of curve motion and she's starting to start the swing. And then after that, she takes a step forward. And so this is where feet placement gets really important, because now if her foot is planted and she's taking kind of like a leaping skip of a step forward, her foot needs to stay in the same place. So I can't move it or else it'll look like her foot sliding. And that's kind of the case for this first pose as well. When she takes the step forward, the front foot needs to stay in place. And then the back foot, it's just about to lead off. So it's the tip of the toe foot is just hovering over the ground to give a little sense of weight and momentum. And then on the next one, I want it to be a big change in direction. And so that's why now she's taking a big step and her body is slightly floating in the air, but she's now swung the sword forward. And then in the next one, she's kind of whipped the sword around. So the sword is going like this, around this way. And because it's a really quick and fast motion, it's like the next big pose. So I don't want to draw any transitions. I don't want to draw any like real in-betweens when I'm blocking this sequence out, or it's going to be a bit too much. And so it's a quick change of direction. And because it's such a big, quick change, you'll read it, when I play this out, you'll read it as like a really fast kind of swing. And so then we go to the next pose, and this is another big step. And again, foot, I'm keeping an eye on the feet, making sure that it's staying in place. And I'll bring the image up so you can kind of see a side-by-side comparison. And you can see that I've exaggerated a little bit, but not too much. And what I wanted to exaggerate was like her really like leaping forward to kind of block the sword hit. So she's really taking a big step forward, and so I wanted to stretch the foot, and I want to maybe have the body lean forward a little bit more in the back. And then afterwards, it's kind of like a leap, and she plants both her feet down, kind of scrunches up. It's kind of like a building up momentum. She sticks out her sword in the previous one, and then she lands on her feet, and it holds in all that momentum. And then to the next one, she doesn't quite release it, but it's another sword block, and then sets up for another one. So this is where I've ended it off. And so today, because I've already blocked it out, today is pretty much just going to be me cleaning up this sequence. Now that I have the rough blocking down, I'm just going to be kind of animating and following this kind of sequence. You can help support us as we continue to make free arts education by becoming a member on Patreon or YouTube. This will give you access to special perks like critiques and classes. Now, I'm gonna try to clean up. And so right now, I'm not gonna actually start adding any details necessarily, but I wanna start making sure everything is lined up proportionally. So just making sure that the position of the head, how it's moving down, feels consistent with the hips as well. So right now I feel like the hips might be a bit too high on the second drawing, so I'm just gonna lower it. I'm gonna switch to my chunky pencil, and I'm just gonna lower the hips a little bit. The other thing is I might try to clean up also the figure itself, as this is essentially the figure I am going to be basing off my final drawing on. I need to make sure that it's clear for me. Like I know what I drew, and I can kind of translate what it is, and I know what I'm drawing, so I know what to attach my drawing to. This is essentially like a very quick model sheet that I'm using. It's just like a guide to give myself a reminder as to what the character, what I want it to roughly look, but I just need to make sure that when I'm drawing that this kind of figure matches. So right now she's holding the sword, and I know it's really messy right now, but for me, as long as it's clear to me. So maybe you guys might be looking at this and be like, what in the world? What is this supposed to be? Or what is this supposed to look like? But as long as it's clear to me and I know what I'm drawing and what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to lead up to, I think that's okay, because everybody has a different drawing style. So right now, you might approach the body differently from me, but as long as it works for you when you're animating, I think it's okay. I'm still trying to keep this loose because I want to do this quickly and not lose any sense of momentum, and just be able to pull it off and get an idea as to where the shoulders are. I like to treat them as kind of like spheres, but don't draw them as spheres, if that makes any sense. But I don't like when I'm drawing the figure, like this is the body. I like to think of it as a sphere first, and then the arm is attached to it. The reason why I think of it as a sphere first is that it allows me to understand the thickness that an arm might have. And if you want to start off with a mannequin first, I think that's okay. It allows you to quickly map out what it is that you're drawing. Some people like to draw the legs really long. It gives them a kind of nice, elegant look. So if you're going for stylized anatomy, then yeah, you know, I think having really long legs is okay. So I'm just cleaning up the mannequin. So this is going to be my base mannequin to reference from, and I just want to make sure that the rest of them all follow at least a general size for it, and I'm gonna have my reference in front of me so that I can at least see it. Let me see. So I'm using this as a way to gauge and judge what the pose was originally, and again, because she's moving down, I want to make sure everything else is also moving down. She's kind of squatting her legs, which means I need to bend them. This is what the cleanup is. It's not the most exciting things sometimes, but it's important. It's kind of like laying down the foundation and the groundwork of your drawing, or else you're gonna come into trouble once you start adding the details in and you realize that the drawing's inconsistent. I'm just trying to lay it down as best as I can, at least as much as I can that will make sense for me when I'm doing this. And I realized that I changed the position of her arms from the reference actually. So I'm gonna just redraw it again. So in the reference, she kind of raising up her shoulders. So I'm gonna have her shoulder come up, and it's covering her face a little bit. And this is why we say do figure drawing, because now I can quickly just map out what her body is doing and how it's kind of turning and adjusting. There is a lot of motion blur, so it's actually kind of hard tracking exactly what's happening underneath, but I think this is what's going on. So I'll draw the sword here, and again, this is a motion trail, just taking the step forward, and I think I need to move the drawing a little bit more because there's a little bit of a shifting. Yeah, now that feels a bit better. Cool. What is the purpose of frames in between the drawings? So if I play it, if I had them all really like right next to each other, it's gonna, you know, zip right by. It's gonna be really, really quick. But if I space them out, it helps actually put it in a proper timing so I can actually see how it's playing out. So that's why I spaced them out the way that I have. Some of them are spaced out a little bit more. You can see that frame 1 runs for 3 frames in between before it hits frame 5. And that's because I want this first position to be a bit of a holding position so that it's not as fast in the transition. And then these ones only have 2 frames in between because I want this to be a fast, energetic sword swing. And because this is the major uppercut, again, I want it to hold a little bit so that there's a little bit of slowing down emotion. And then we immediately swing over, and again, very quick swing. So that's why there's less space. But that's why I do it. I know that if you're doing this traditionally, well, obviously you wouldn't have these gaps, but that's where you would start making notes to tell the animators under you, if you were the supervising animator, to just let them know or give them the animation planning chart sheet, just letting them know like this is what the sequence is and this is how long this pose should be, how long you should hold it, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'm trying to recapture this phase, but in terms of exaggeration, what I'm trying to do is capture this like weight in the leg just like a little bit more, and also the sword movement. Even though it's blurred, I want to capture that sense of her bringing and flipping that sword really quickly to capturing that momentum. So I think the sword is actually here. So the hilt is here, but I want to have a bit of motion trail. So maybe I won't put that one there for now. It is definitely like a bit tricky because the photos that I'm using can only show so much. So I have to actually extrapolate a little bit. So even though I'm just essentially copying the footage, there's a lot of unknowns. You know, there's a lot of things that I'm like, oh, where is the head? What is the arm doing over here? What is happening? What is going on? So I have to kind of infer and make decisions on my own as to like what is exactly happening. But I want to make sure that this motion with the leg in the back is there. And I want to make sure that they line up and that it's captured properly at the very least. And then here's the knee. It's going this way. I think this should be good enough. So I wanted the foot to just be touching the ground. I don't want it to be exactly like there. So I'm just going to move this up again. So lines up with the momentum. And this is what we have so far. I hope you enjoyed this part of animating with me. Up to this point, we've cleaned up the main keys and blocked in what the movement should be like. In the next part, I'll be refining the movement further and really making sure the movements flow from one to the other. If you enjoyed this walkthrough, check out our virtual classes where we have tons of classes taught by our amazing instructors. We provide feedback as well as informative lessons and engaging projects. Our classes range from drawing, painting, to digital drawing, as well as an animation mentorship class that I teach. We run through the fundamentals of animation, as well as fun mini projects to help elevate your animation skills. So if you'd like to improve your art skills, check out our website for more information. Start today and level up your practice. If you learned something new, please like and share with a fellow art nerd. And if you love receiving quality free arts education, subscribe. Here's a couple other videos you can check out next.